film begins with a young black man walking down the road. He notices a car following him for a while. Just as he turns around, someone from a white car kidnaps him. The scene then cuts to a couple, Chris and Rose. Chris knows that Rose's family and their town dislike black people. Yet, Rose not only dates him, but also wants to introduce him to her family. Chris is a bit nervous about this. He mentally prepares himself for the locals' unfriendly behavior. But Rose promises that nothing bad will happen. Everything will be fine. Still, Chris needs to share his fears with someone. So, he calls his friend and tells him he is going to Rose's house. He mentions that her family and the town might not like black people, so he might be turned away. His friend laughs and says, "I'm worried that this girl is leading you into a trap." Chris laughs it off, and they hang up. Chris and Rose then start their journey. Rose is driving, and on the way a deer jumps out, which is hit by the car and dies. They are both deeply upset. Chris, being a good guy, takes responsibility for the situation and calls the police. When the police arrive, they ask for Chris's ID just because he's black. Seeing this, Rose gets angry and tells the officer, "I was driving. The car is mine. I have the papers and the license. Why do you need Chris's ID?" Seeing Rose defend him so well, Chris feels immense love and pride in his choice. They arrive at Rose's house. To his surprise, Rose's family warmly welcomes him. Chris is touched to see them treat a black man with equal respect. Rose's dad gives Chris a tour of the house. He shows a family photo, including a picture of Rose's grandfather. He explains that his father won second place in the Olympics because a black man took first place. During the tour, Chris notices that all the servants in the house are black. Before Chris can think too much, Rose's dad explains that he hired them to care for his parents. When they passed away, he didn't fire them, but kept them as part of the family. Hearing this, Chris's respect for them increases. Later, they all sit together on the lawn and start talking. They ask Chris about his family. He explains that after his mother's death, his father moved to a different house. This brings a strange joy to Rose's father. A weird expression appears on his face, as if some secret purpose has been fulfilled. Then Rose's father asks him, "Do you smoke?" Chris replies, "Yes, but I want to quit soon." Her father says, "It's not hard. You can get help from my wife. She can cure anything with hypnosis. She even hypnotized me to quit smoking." Chris finds it strange that a habit he's had for years could be cured by one hypnosis session. He smiles and declines the offer. At dinner time, while eating, Chris notices the housekeeper staring at him strangely. Just then, Rose's brother arrives. He makes weird remarks and even tries to force Chris to fight. Chris wisely refuses. After dinner, they go to their room. Rose apologizes for her brother's behavior. Chris says it's okay. Then they try to sleep. Rose falls asleep, but Chris cannot. He finds the atmosphere strange. Everything seems fine, but he can't figure out what is wrong. Confused, He goes outside and sees the gardener running very fast towards him. Chris is scared, but without a word, the man runs past him as if he is practicing a sprint. Looking up at the window, he sees the housekeeper staring at him with weird eyes. This is all very strange, so he goes inside. Chris had smoked a cigarette outside. When he comes in, Rose's mother smells the smoke on him. She tells Chris, "This habit isn't good. Come sit down. I'll help you quit." Chris doesn't want to sit, but something in her words pulls him in, and he sits on the sofa opposite her. The woman is holding a teacup and a spoon, stirring it repeatedly. She asks Chris about the day his mother died, and Chris feels awkward. He doesn't want to answer. But as soon as the woman starts stirring the spoon rapidly, Chris is hypnotized. Tears well up in his eyes. In a trance, he tells her things he didn't want to share. Chris cannot understand what is happening. The woman hypnotizes him with just a cup and spoon. Quickly, she gains so much control over Chris that he falls into a deep void in his mind. In the real world, his body is paralyzed. He can see and hear, but he cannot speak and cannot move. In the next scene, he suddenly wakes up in his bed. He thinks last night's event was just a dream. He is very relieved. He grabs his camera and goes outside. He walks in the woods, takes pictures, and meets the gardener upon returning. Chris tries to have a friendly conversation with him, but Chris feels something strange. Despite looking young, the man talks like an old person. Chris is asked, "How was your session last night?" Chris looks shocked and realizes the hypnosis to quit smoking was real. This terrifies Chris. Everything from last night, which he thought was a dream, actually happened. He goes to Rose and says, "Your mom crossed a line. She hypnotized me without my permission." Surprisingly, it worked, and now even the thought of a cigarette makes him sick. He tells Rose he doesn't want to stay here anymore. As he says this, he sees many luxury cars pulling up to the house. He is surprised. Rose tells him her parents are hosting a party. They go downstairs. Chris ignores his fears and joins the party, but he notices something weird. The party is full of old people. They are all white, except for one man. Seeing this, Chris feels a bit uncomfortable and goes to talk to the only black man there. He looks young, yet he is dressed like an old man. Chris is even more shocked when he meets the man's wife. She is a white woman, about 30 years older than him. The young man speaks like an old person too. Chris also notices that all the black people here wear hats to cover their heads, including the housekeeper. Frightened, Chris walks away to find a quiet spot. A blind man approaches and praises Chris's photography, even though Chris never mentioned it or showed his work. The old man then explains, "I used to be a painter. Now my vision is poor, so I can't do much." Chris becomes more confused and returns to his room. His phone was charging, but someone unplugged it. He sees the housekeeper there. She apologizes to him. She says she must have bumped it while cleaning. Chris tells her it's okay, He tries to be friendly with her. He shares his fears about how something feels very wrong here. She smiles widely and tells him not to worry, saying this family is really nice. But strangely, huge tears roll down her face as she says this. Confused, Chris calls his friend and tells him everything is weird. He mentions the strange party filled with old white people, and he tells him about the hypnosis session. Hearing this, his friend immediately tells Chris to run away. He believes this family will hypnotize him and make him a slave. Chris then returns to the party, where all the guests start talking about him. They discuss his body shape, treating him like a product, not a human. Chris feels very disturbed by this, and he sneaks a photo of the young black man to send to his friend. But his camera flash goes off, blinding the man. Suddenly, the man's nose bleeds. He snaps out of his trance and lunges at Chris. He shakes Chris, yelling at him to get out immediately. The guests quickly pull the man away and take him into a room. When they bring the man back out, he is completely normal again. He apologizes to Chris for his outburst, but Chris is fully terrified now. Rose's dad tells Chris not to worry. He claims the man just has a medical condition, causing panic attacks from bright flashes. Chris goes to the lakeside, and Rose follows him. She tries to comfort him. He tells Rose, "I'm scared and I want to leave." Rose says, "Just wait a little longer. We will both leave together." Chris agrees to stay a bit longer. He trusts Rose because he wants to spend his life with her. Meanwhile, Chris sends the photo of the young black man to his friend. Seeing the photo, his friend gets worried and calls Chris, saying, "You are in grave danger. That man is not who they say he is. His real name is Andre, and he was reported missing 6 months ago. He is still missing." It turns out this is the same man who was kidnapped at the start of the movie. After hearing this, Chris decides to leave instantly. He starts packing his bags. Meanwhile, Rose enters the room. Chris asks her for the car keys. Rose says, "I don't have them on me. I'll find them." At this point, Rose acts nervous. She asks Chris, "Tell me what's wrong." "Why do we have to leave?" Chris replies, "Now is not the time. I will explain once we are out." Rose goes downstairs to look for the keys. Chris then notices a closet door slightly open. Looking inside, Chris finds a small box. Inside, it are dozens of photos showing Rose with past boyfriends. All of them are black men. Rose had lied about Chris being her first black boyfriend. Every photo shows a black partner. Shockingly, among these pictures are photos of the gardener and the housekeeper. Chris realizes that Rose is working with her family in this sick trap. Now, he knows he cannot trust Rose. He grabs his bag and runs downstairs to escape. But Rose's entire family is waiting for him downstairs, blocking the door. He yells at Rose, "Give me the car keys." Rose pretends to cry, "I can't find them." He tries to push past them, but then Rose reveals her true colors. Her face goes cold and she pulls out the keys, refusing to give them to him. As he tries to run, Rose's brother attacks him. When Chris tries to fight back, Rose's mother uses her teacup and spoon to hypnotize him, instantly paralyzing his body. His mind falls into the dark void, and he passes out completely. After this, the family drags Chris down into the basement. Meanwhile, his friend has been calling Chris nonstop. He realizes Chris is in terrible danger. He goes to the police station and reports the missing black people. But the police just laugh at his story, thinking it is crazy that white people are hypnotizing them to make them sex slaves. The friend realizes that if he wants to help Chris, he has to do it himself. Chris wakes up in the basement, strapped tightly to a chair. An old TV turns on, playing a video. It reveals that Rose's grandfather invented a twisted medical procedure. When he lost a running race to a black athlete, he became obsessed with black bodies, believing they were physically stronger and superior in every way. Therefore, he created a surgery to give old white people a second life. They implant an old white person's brain into a healthy, young black body. Chris is terrified by this sick truth. Before he can process it, the sound of the stirring teacup plays on the screen, and Chris passes out. When he wakes up again, the TV shows a live video call. It is the blind man who bought Chris at the party auction. He talks to Chris, saying, "I want to explain what happens next. After the surgery, I will have complete control over your body." First, they hypnotize him to trap his mind in the dark void. Chris's mind will be stuck as a passenger, watching his own body. Then, through surgery, the blind man's brain will be placed inside Chris's head. He will take full control. Now Chris understands the evil plan. Rose is the bait. She seduces young black people and brings them home. Then, her parents auction them off to their wealthy, old friends. These old people pay top dollar for a new body to cure their aging and sickness. The original host's mind is pushed into the void forever, practically dead. In fact, this happened to the other black people at the house. That is why the housekeeper cried when she told Chris that the family was wonderful. The words she spoke came from Rose's grandmother's brain. But the real girl trapped inside wanted to tell Chris that he was in danger and to run away. Since she couldn't speak, her panic came out as tears. The gardener always wears a hat because he has a large surgical scar on his head from the brain transplant. Desperate, Chris notices the leather chair is torn. He starts pulling cotton stuffing out with his bound hands. The hypnosis video plays again, and Chris pretends to pass out. Upstairs, Rose's dad, a surgeon, cuts open the blind man's head to remove his brain. When Rose's brother comes down to fetch Chris, Chris suddenly jumps up and attacks him. It turns out that Chris used the chair's cotton as earplugs. Blocking the sound prevented the hypnosis, allowing him to stay awake and free himself. When the brother does not return with Chris, the father goes out to check on them. But Chris is waiting with a heavy deer statue. As the dad approaches, Chris stabs him in the chest with the deer's sharp antlers. The father dies. As Chris runs toward the exit, he runs into Rose's mother. Seeing him loose, she realizes he was not hypnotized. She grabs her teacup to put him under again. She quickly stirs her tea. But before she can trap him, Chris lunges forward and knocks the cup out of her hand, shattering it. Without her teacup, her hypnosis magic is useless. To fight back, she grabs a nearby weapon and tries to attack Chris. But Chris overpowers her, and she is killed in the struggle. Chris finally kills the mother. Meanwhile, the brother wakes up from the basement floor and attacks Chris again to stop him. But Chris fights back and defeats the brother, leaving him on the floor. He rushes out to escape. Upstairs, Rose sits in her room wearing headphones.